Today on the Mr. Maple podcast, Matt and Tim interview Billy Schwartz and discuss witches' brooms, Muhammad Ali, Japanese maples, and the history behind the trees.
Hey guys, I'm Tim. Welcome to the Mr. Maple Show. We're a podcast weekly. Every single week we put out a new podcast on gardening. Find us on your favorite podcast platform, subscribe to us, and give us a 5-star rating that helps more people find it.
Hey guys, I'm Matt. We love bringing you the Japanese Maple Talk Show. We love covering interesting topics. And guys, I think we have a super treat for you today. If you like the history of sports, the history of plants, the history of Japanese maples, you're going to want to stick around for this one. We're interviewing, famous nurseryman Billy Schwartz. He's done so many things in the plant world, from conifers to working with rare flora to working with Dick Wolf. There's so many cool things about this guy. And I'm just going to tell you, nobody tells a story like Billy Schwartz.
That's for certain. If you want to see the full live version of this, where you can actually watch the video component, we air the video component of this on Sundays at 8 p.m. for our podcast. So you can actually go and get involved in the live chat. There's a great community of people there who just love plants. And it'll be interesting for this one because I think a lot of people really enjoy getting involved with the live chat on this particular podcast.
We're really growing our podcast listeners. And guys, if you haven't heard of our business before, we're a mail order business out of Western North Carolina. We ship Japanese maples all over the United States. And we do over 1,400 different varieties of Japanese maples. We do a ton of azaleas, conifers, ginkgos, other fun plants. Definitely check us out on MrMaple.com. If you want to support what we're doing and support these podcasts, it's a great way to get involved.
And as always, we add 10 new trees every single Tuesday at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Sign up for our weekly emails on MrMaple.com. You'll get a heads up of what's getting listed. And you can start shopping at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time every Tuesday at 10 a.m. We got cool plants every single week.
Well, guys, let's get into it. We've got a force of nature here on the phone, the flower man himself, one of my favorite people to talk to, Billy Schwartz. Good morning, Billy. How you doing today?
We're doing well. I just drafted some Aku, Shibiku, whatever. It's the best variegated regular leaf that I found.
Oh, very cool. Is it one of your introductions?
No, I forget where I got it from. I got it a couple of years ago. The wood is really striated, beautiful pink stripes, and the leaves are small, about 3/4 of an inch, and it just has variegation that blows all the others away.
Oh, nice.
I'll see you get some, because I got 3 that have taken out of 5, and I just did some more. AKU something, Shibiku.
So for our listeners, I know a lot of these things, but I'd love to ask you some questions. I already know the answer for this, but I'd like to ask you, we've actually talked to you a good bit. You're actually in our Red Maple Nurseries little thing we did where we kind of documented and talked about that a little bit. So our listeners will definitely have to check that out on YouTube. But Billy, how did you get into gardening, and how did you get into Japanese maple specifically?
Well, at an early age, I guess I was 7 years old, I guess, and my father used to take me for walks in Fairmount Park, which is the largest city park in the world. It's a public park in Philadelphia. And I really got interested that way, and then I did all the gardening at the house as a young lad. Growing vegetables and roses and all kinds of things. And then in 1978, a friend of mine who was a realtor came across Rare Flora, a 30-acre parcel in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, with rare pines, spruces, maples, and the owner was dying. He was a cabinet maker, and nurseryman, and his wife specialized in variegateds, and it was for sale, and I negotiated the sale, and I represented a bank at the time here in Philadelphia, and we were able to get an interest-free loan, but unfortunately interest rates went to 24% that year. So when we borrowed at $400,000, it was $100,000 a year tab on interest.
Oh, goodness.
Hopefully we're not headed there again.
And we tried to give the property to various institutions, including National Arboretum, but nobody would pay to dig this stuff. So we held auctions for 2 days, made back our $400,000,
Wow.
and distributed a lot of plants throughout the country from Rara Flora.
I actually have customers of mine who shopped with the Bergmans there and know their trees very well. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm the guy that put it together and held the auctions and whatnot.
So I'm guessing then you saw all these cool plants and they started to pique your interest?
Oh, absolutely. Because I didn't know anything about the rare stuff until that day.
Right.
And then I followed the nursery and finally disposed of it. I handled all of that. And so I got to know and learn all about the rare stuff from Rare Flora.
I get that. Once you get exposed to the good stuff, it's hard to go back, right? Once you've learned this whole world of all the cool things.
Yeah, but it you know, and it can get you into trouble because I had 5 years of Latin in high school, unfortunately, in a private school, and there was a tree that they had there that eventually was sold for $15,500 in the ground, undug, at auction. It was a dwarf Pinus parviflorum Bergmani.
Oh yeah, okay.
And so I looked at it, and I didn't know anything about the rare stuff. And the wife was showing me around because Mr. Bergman was suffering from cancer, and he was bedridden and couldn't get out of bed. He was dying. And I looked at it, and I said, "Oh, that's a beautiful penis."
Oh, goodness.
So she turned beet red, and in clipped English said, "No, we don't pronounce the literal Latin here. It's Pinus."
Well, we must be two peas in a pod here.
I gave her my Elvis Presley impression, said, "Thank you very much."
I made the same joke in the Maple Society meeting, and it was in Europe, and it didn't go over. It was crickets, except for the gentleman from Australia who was laughing really hard. We were told that we were told by one of the presenters, this was in Belgium, they said, "Well, you're saying Acker wrong. You shouldn't say Acer. It should be Acker." And I said, "With all due respect, we don't say Pinus parviflora, do we?" It was like crickets across the board, except for my good friend from Australia who was laughing his tail off. But that was kind of lost there in translation for the joke, but I thought it was fun.
Yeah.
So Mrs. Bergman, what kind of lady was she? I mean, they've introduced a lot of really cool plants at Rara Flora Nursery. I mean,
absolutely.
Was her name
them all because I had to, we had to list them and sell them at auction and whatnot. So that's how I got into it.
Do you know if she was Bonnie or Edna?
Oh, no, Bonnie was a daughter.
Okay.
Yeah, we have cultivars named after both.
So and then there's Barry Bergman. I mean, they've got the whole.
Barry was also a daughter.
Wow.
There's 2 daughters. Yeah.
Wow. So, I mean, it's crazy. I mean, they've got so many cool introductions from Rara Flora Nursery, including Acer palmatum dissectum Rara Flora. I mean, that is.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's the one with all the great fall color.
Great plant. Underused for sure. It should be more popular amongst lace leaves.
Yeah. She was, or they were weird because, they had Arabian horses.
Oh, that's cool.
And she put a strychnine needle into the neck of each and buried them. And then a year later dug them up and donated the bones to Pennsylvania, some kind of historical society or something, because the Arabians have less vertebra in their back. They're shorter coupled. And but she put them all to death because she didn't think anybody could take better care of them.
Oh, wow. So I've got to ask you a little bit about this. Was it before or after this time that you were like Muhammad Ali's lawyer?
It was after that time. It was the last Jerry Quarry fight, and I accompanied him to Atlanta, Georgia, for that fight. And then it was the first Frazier fight in New York, at Madison Square Garden. If you see it on TV, you'll see me sitting at ringside with my dad.
Oh, that's so cool. I'm a boxing guy. I like heavyweight boxing. So,
well, he was the best. He was the best boxer ever, and the reason is that he was so intelligent. His IQ had to be over 150. The toughest thing in sports, if you've ever played it, is to think and act at the same time.
Yeah,
and he could do it. And because he could avoid so many punches. And of course, the first Frazier fight, he did not dance, and that's why he got beat up so badly and lost. And that was part of the deal that was made in his backyard. I saw it being made. I looked over the fence, and he was sitting there with Don King, the promoter, and Frazier and his people. And, they made the deal for 3 fights, and the fact that he wouldn't dance at the first fight. Wow. That's why he lost.
Wow. All right, I think our podcast just blew up right there. A little big piece of boxing history. So, I'm glad I asked that question. I like boxing. Our grandfather, which I named my son after, actually sparred with Jack Dempsey when he came to Hendersonville.
Oh, wow.
No
Kidding.
I'm a boxing fan. I like the history of it a little bit.
Well, he was the greatest. I mean, nobody, as he proved in the next 2 fights, as long as he could run and do the rope-a-dope, he was fine.
Right.
So you told me before he called you the Flower Man?
Yeah, because I had all of these Japanese maples.
What did he think about all your Japanese maples?
I had a small backyard, and I had all these damn trees, and vegetables. And so, and so he called me Flower Man, and I called him Moo, That was just the name that I called him. But,
That's
well,
cool.
then a week after 2 weeks after the Frazier fight, I get a call from Herbert Muhammad out of Chicago, who was head of the Black Muslim movement, and they're not nice people. They executed Malcolm X on stage, and the message was that Whitey need not apply, and I knew what that meant. It's like a gun to your head. So I hugged Moo, and he hugged me, and that was the last time we saw or spoke to each other.
You've certainly lived such an interesting life. I have to ask, were there any other celebrity encounters there, or celebrities that you introduced to Japanese maples?
I don't even know how many to tell you about. I mean, I did the mile with Charlton Heston at his home.
Oh, wow.
And it was very embarrassing because he was in motorcycle boots, and I'm in sneakers and shorts, and we're running through these canyons, and I lost sight of him, and then I got lost.
Dude goes from Muhammad Ali to Moses.
They had to come and get me. It was very embarrassing.
Wow.
I had lunch with he and his wife, lovely lady. And then, let's see, I took George Papard hunting. He was Banachek guy, and so we went down to Maryland duck hunting, and he had a dog named Babe that was Chesapeake Bay Retriever that had never been blooded. It was trained for $2,000 or so, but never blooded, never actually hunted a live animal. So I had these 2 Goldens that weighed about 100 pounds apiece, had them tied together at their choke collar with a leash around my wrist. And the first duck came over, and he shot. I said, "Don't yell." And before I could get the word fetch out, he yelled "fetch." Well, that's all my dogs needed to hear. Uh-oh. They charge in the water, and I can't get this damn leash off my wrist. I go in the water. His dog jumps into the decoys, about 20 of them. grabs the first one because it doesn't know about live ducks. It's used to decoys. And it's dragging this decoy, and all 20 decoys are all tied together, and they're all starting to get towards shore. And this dog is swimming its ass off. It's like a Chinese fire drill, Yeah, damn.
You're reminding me why I miss hanging out with you so much. Your stories are the best.
Hey, so how did you? So how did we get from Rara, Florida, to you meeting Dick Wolf?
Well, it was funny. It was at the Philadelphia Flower Show, which at the time was the largest flower show in the world. It was bigger than the ones in England.
Wow.
And he had an exhibit where he was grafting trees, and he had small grafts and large trees that were potted and brought into leaf. And I think he won a silver tray award for his exhibition. And I met him there, and I was so intrigued by what he was doing that I met up with him about a week later, and at his home in Lima, Pennsylvania, and then he became like my second father. And he never had children. His wife couldn't for various reasons, and the employees that he had were treated like family, and he would bring them along, from knowing nothing to being maple experts, and then to actually running their own nurseries.
Very cool.
Some of which you probably know of today. And he taught me everything I know early about maples. And he originated a lot of varieties. And he was a World War II, as you know, bomber pilot. And he was the lead pilot in the Schweinfurt ball bearing raids in Germany. And he was one of the few that came back alive. They suffered terrible losses. And in his 24th mission, I asked him, I said, Dick, in your 24th mission, you had to go back and you saw all your brothers going down in flames. How did you do it? How did you get into that plane? And he said, Billy, it's a job. You do it. You just do it. And that was his attitude. And then he went on to teach flying to the head of Sun Oil and selling airplanes. And then that lasted a few years. And then he went back into his father's business, which was the nursery business.
That's wild.
So
that's how it happened.
So, Billy, we've got all types of listeners, people who are just getting into this, people who have been into maples for a while. For those of you who don't know, we're talking about the guy who introduced Emperor One. We're talking about the guy who introduced Green Mist. We're talking about a guy who had so many amazing introductions.
A lot of our online listeners may not even saw that Red Maple Nurseries list video so far, but Red Maple Nurseries with Dick Wolf, really instrumental in Japanese maples in the United States. And I would say help popularize them a lot. But many of our famous introductions, even like Red Dragon, that are still around today, we can thank Dick Wolf and some of the efforts of guys like you who were, would you consider yourself an apprentice to Dick Wolf?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And, I discovered, it was funny. There was a tree. Oh, I'd love to get some scion-wood of it too. I don't know whatever happened to it. It was Dottie. It was a dwarf, and it grew like a pancake.
Yeah.
And it was 6 feet above the ground in a red Japanese maple, and it was about 3 feet wide. I used to have photographs. I think I sent you guys photographs of it.
Wow.
And Dick and I had walked under this broom for 12, 15 years and never knew that it was there. And then when Dick had passed away, I got a message that Dottie, his wife's sister, was dying and at the house. And I went out to the house to say goodbye. And I'm walking out in the nursery, and I see this brilliant red Japanese maple broom. And it's flat as a pancake. And the central lobe is elongated, twice as long as all the other lobes.
Interesting.
And so it's really different.
Mm-hmm.
And it was beautiful. And I went back in the house, and Dottie was in bed, in the hospital bed in the living room. And I said, Dottie, I just found a witch's broom here, and it's beautiful, and I'm going to name it after you. And she smiled, and a week later, she was dead. Yeah, true story.
So whenever it came to witches' brooms with you and Dick Wolf,
y'all kind of exchanged a few, didn't you? You each named witches' brooms for each other, or for family members of each other.
Yeah. Rare Flora. Shayna was one. Dick originally found it at Villanova's campus, and then I named it after one of my daughters, and then it became very famous. And then there was Gossamer, of course. I found that at Dick's nursery, and then I named it. And there are a bunch of them that I named that we found together. So it was funny. One night we really had a problem. We're driving along, and it's mischief night, the night before Halloween, and we see a magnolia Sulongiata, and it's got a witch's broom in it. So I get out, and it's just about dusk, getting dark, and I said, Dick, I'll go, because he was much older than me. I said, I'll go, and I'll climb up and take a look at this thing close up.
Yeah.
So I get up in the tree, and just then a state trooper pulls up, with the jodhpurs and the dark glasses and the hat, the whole thing. And he looks up and says, boy, what you doing up in that tree? Now, this is mischief night.
Uh-oh.
And I said, well, sir, there's this witch's broom. A what broom? A witch what?
Right.
For Halloween stuff, Oh, my God. Fast-talking lawyer, though, I was able to talk my way out of it.
You kind of got us in a little bit of the same trouble. You sent us one time to see the original Shayna on the campus of Villanova, and it's in front of the Department of Public Safety. So Tim and I, being the good rule-abiding citizens we are, we walked into the Department of Public Safety and showed them our business cards and said, hey, we're crazy nurserymen, and we're here to take signs off this original Shayna, and we just like to source everything from the original. But while we're out there, I'm 6'2", and I'm running and jumping and getting some cuttings off this in the rain, and there was a shift change. So there's probably 30 or 40 officers walking in and out, and they're like, what in the heck is going on out here with these guys in front? A lot of them were really interested. They come in, they're like, it's like storming, and they're like, what are these nutcases doing jumping up in our tree?
Absolutely.
So we had a very similar experience with that. So when it came to witches' brooms, you found tons and tons throughout the years. What was your very first experience you can remember with the witch's broom? Was it something you learned from Dick Wolf? Was it something you learned from the Conifer Society?
It was Shayna. That was the very first one.
Wow.
That was the first. And then I knew what to look for. Once you see one, it's like when I moved out here in Coatesville, Pennsylvania. I'm driving along about, 5 blocks from the house, and I see this witch's broom, which is Judy Girl, which in my opinion is the slowest growing, best red witch's broom there is. None better.
In production
Did you
here
guys
at MrMaple.
get a good take on the Cyanwood?
Oh yes, sir. We've got plenty. We're beefing up numbers on that one here.
And on one of our last trips to come visit you actually took us to go see that broom before you really started grafting it.
Yeah.
And so we've got good photos of that.
I think he gave us one of the very first grafts he had takeoff of it. So I really appreciate it. We've got it in production here. Yeah.
Oh, it is in my opinion the best of all of them because it's so small growing and it's so full and it's so red.
That original broom there, the shape on it's just awesome too. Yeah. I mean, if it replicates any of that, wow.
Yeah. But and never drive behind me because when I'm driving in the winter, I'm always looking side to side to side, looking at every tree. I mean, I found them in willows, weeping willows. I found trees, all kinds of pines, all kinds of stuff, oaks, and I'm all constantly. I just found an Acer rubrum broom.
Oh, cool!
And I'm going to try and call it Lil Red. L-I-L,
I like it.
Red.
I need some sign on that.
It's a very vertical. It's like vertical spikes, about a foot each, and it's like crammed full of these vertical spikes. And so I'm going to try and get some for next year. I've got seedlings that I've been growing as understocks, and they'll be ready for the size of the wood for next year. And next winter, I'll be trying to graft it, and if I'm successful, you'll get some.
Nice.
But I'm going to call it Lil Red.
I've learned to, if I see a broom while we're driving, almost not even tell Tim, because if I see a broom and Tim's driving and I say, oh, did you see that, like, just trash broom in that tree over there? Tim will run out of the road the rest of the trip. If we're driving to Nashville, that's it. His day is done. He will have to find 50 brooms to beat me. But
that's it.
I don't think anybody's found more palmatum brooms than you. I think your numbers are pretty good on these.
Well, yeah, probably. But there's this, I think he's a priest in Baltimore.
Oh, yeah. Good friend of ours. New York. Bob McCaffrey.
Yeah.
He's got a real knack for finding them too,
Lady
for sure.
Fatima and all these other religious names. Yeah.
He's been getting us several.
He's found
of those.
quite a few.
Yeah, he's got a knack for it too. He doesn't like to call them witches' brooms. He calls them blessings, which I think is funny and cool too. But yeah, really cool.
Well, I've been on a lot of wild goose chases where people tell me about a broom. And I drive and I get there and it's not a broom. It's a squirrel's nest or something,
right,
or there just isn't any, or they saw shadows or something. And that's very deflating, but that's the name of the game. You got to go.
How many brooms do you think you've seen? Would you just estimate if you counted your number of brooms you found?
Well, I'd say about maybe 30.
It's impressive. It's you definitely got a knack for finding good ones.
Well, it's it's also word of mouth. Some of them, because they know about me, so they call, say, I got this strange thing. Can you come look at it? Funny, I was like in Daytona Beach, and in Florida, and I'm walking along the beach, and there's this red cedar, and there's a witch's broom coming out of the edge of it. And there's when I was driving to Florida one year, I see a whole bunch of brooms and pines all the way down. And some of them I made notes of, and I've lost the notes.
Once you find it, you can't stop.
That's the way it is. Huh?
Once you find that first one, you can't stop, right? Then it's like your brain automatically goes for it.
You can't. And it's funny. One of them that I found recently in a big red maple, a Japanese red maple. It turns green in the summertime, bright green, and there's no knot of wood where it joins the tree. Very uncharacteristic. But it you can't tell that it's a broom until you see it change color. Wow. I'll have to take a photograph of it and send it to you. And it's useless because it's green. Who's going to buy a big leaf broom that isn't dwarf, but it's a broom? It's because of the changing color.
Billy, on the very first witch's broom that Matt and I found, we got to this garden down in Spartanburg, and I said to Matt, this garden's got a ton of old trees. We're going to find a witch's broom. And I was walking in front of Matt, and
about 2 minutes later, we found a broom.
Yeah, I was walking in front of him and the guy who had the garden. And he said, "What's he doing?" He said, "He thinks he's going to find a witch's broom." And I said, "Here it is." And
the guy that owned the garden about fell over. He was like, "You came here and found that ahead of time."
Yeah. Well, that happens. It was like one time, Sid, of Sid Waxman?
Yeah.
In Connecticut.
I never met him personally, but I know of his legacy.
With the pine brooms.
Mm-hmm.
And he came down to visit me, and we went to see Shana. And in the backyard of that house is a huge pine tree, Pinus strobus, white pine. And there was a broom up there. And all the years that I've been visiting Shana, I never saw it.
Oh,
and
wow.
Sid said to me, there's a broom back there. I said, what? Get out of here. And sure enough, there was.
What was Professor Waxman like? He's introduced a ton of interesting plants.
He was a nice guy. He was very down to earth and not professorial at all.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, a lot of these self-proclaimed professorial types have never planted a tree in their life, and they really don't know. It's like God. One year I was at the IPPS convention in Michigan, and some professorial type said that in order to stop mice in your greenhouse, you just sprinkle hot pepper everywhere, and it'll deter them. And then the next year, he did not show up, and some of the nurserymen who had sprinkled pepper said it didn't do a damn thing, and we heard the mice yelling, "Caliente, caliente," running down the aisles. They loved it.
Oh man, I know he
and that's my professorial story.
That's hilarious. I know he
But
grew.
he was a true nurseryman who planted out, and he was the one who discovered that all of the pine brooms are female.
Oh,
There are no male pine brooms,
wow, that's fascinating.
and the male side comes from the other Pinus strobus, the big ones, and then half of the seedlings are dwarf and the other half are regular.
Yeah, I believe
that's
sea
why.
urchin was a seedling he had collected from a female broom, one of the more popular, pine brooms for sure.
That's crazy. I'd have loved to have been a fly on the wall whenever y'all were going and talking about Shayna and finding this witch's broom.
I'd like to sit in on that one.
That's two plant legends right there. I mean, that's crazy.
I'm still jealous that you and Tim, and maybe I'll have to make the trip back up. You took Tim one time to visit Dick Wolf's property. So I have to admit, I'm still kind of jealous of that trip. I didn't make that one. So
it's still there, and there are still a lot of these. In fact, there's one tree that I want to replicate. It's the tree form of Scolopendrifolium.
Oh.
It must be 30 feet tall, 25 feet tall. It's a tree with one trunk, and it's like a pentifolium, with like 5 lobes, and it's what they call the tree form instead of the multiple trunk thing that everybody grafts, and it doesn't have these long, elongated lobes. It's different, but it's a variety that Dick collected, I don't know, 40, 50 years ago.
Maybe I can twist your arm and get up there this year with, since Tim got to go, you can take me sometime, because I'm still jealous of that trip.
Hey,
anytime, man, anytime.
Hey, be careful what you say. I'll take you up on that.
I don't know if you know this,
absolutely.
One of the plants that I was just enthralled by was the original green mist. And you were being Vanna White, and you had your hand out to the side in front, and that's still one of our main photos we use for green mist on our website today is you being Vanna White around the original green mist.
I've got to go see that.
Absolutely. It's the best green dissectum that I know of because of the tricolor in the fall,
mm-hmm.
and because it's hardier than waterfall. And its seedlings are, I would say, 80% are dissectum.
I would love to know if there are any cultivars that are on that property that might have been missed to the trade, and like Red Devil or anything like that.
Well, that tree form of Scolopendrifolium is one.
Okay.
That I know of.
The other one that is lost in the trade that we've started propagating more is the true Aconitafolium, which is that bigger leaf japonicum.
That is there.
Yeah.
And the leaves can get almost a foot in size.
Because in the nursery trade today, Mei Kujaku has got the name Aconitafolium on it. And the leaves are completely different. I mean, it's known as Aconitafolium in the nursery trade today. And when we
look at those older ones that Dick Wolf had, or that are at Longwood Gardens, or some of the really old
National Arboretum
collectors, the one at the National Arboretum, they're way more like a Vitafolium style leaf,
but a little more divided.
Yeah, it's definitely different, but it's not what we see as Mei Kujaku.
The one at Dick's place is, as I said, it's a huge leaf,
mm-hmm.
and it's in my view, it's the original.
Now, was that was the parent to Gossamer?
Yes.
We've grafted that one, and to avoid confusion, we've just listed it as parent Gossamer. So we actually have some of those genetics here. We just listed as parent Gossamer. I don't know if we've really put it out in the trade that way.
If you
but
look at that leaf, you'll see how big it is, and it turns a beautiful red in the fall.
Mm-hmm.
But I love those Japonicum selections.
And that one has a big, almost like a pussy willow bud in the spring.
Yeah. Hey, while we're on japonicums, let me ask you a question about one I saw in your Green Mansion nurseries when we were there that was just gorgeous, and we're going to be doing more of it. And that was, I believe, your introduction, Acer japonicum aurora borealis.
Yeah, aurora borealis is a neat tree, and I've never. It has a lot of seed, but I've never been able to get any of them to sprout. It's best colored when it's drought deprived. It really colors up then with all kinds of color, orange and yellow and red and all kinds of stuff. And it's it's a low growing. It grows to about 6-7 feet in about 15 years.
Good to know. Good to know.
Now, you were one of the first people when we were visiting who introduced us to so many cool, unique japonicum selections. I think you had one called Irish Lace as well. That was more of an Acer japonicum selection, a little more mounding style.
Yes.
And the Aurora Borealis, the original form of Aconitifolium. And
I think I see we need to be doing a Billy Schwartz introductions list as well. I think we need to go ahead and get this laid out.
What about the broom on a?
Well, do you have another hour?
We do actually. Yeah, we actually have all the time we need.
What about the broom? The broom on a broom, English Town WB. I remember you'd showing us.
Yeah, that was one from New Jersey, and it was. Let me see, who was it? It was. Oh God, what the hell was his name? He was. Oh jeez, he was a refrigeration heating expert. And he went into Japanese maples and had a greenhouse. And then he had a bad snowstorm that caved in his greenhouse, his plastic house. And there was a really cold snap down to 2 degrees, and he lost everything in the greenhouse, thousands of trees. And he then quit nurturing. It was a shame.
I remember you showing us a broom on Englishtown, and then I was at Charlie Morgan's and spotted his Englishtown, and it had a witch's broom at the bottom of it. And part of me wonders if
that one just keeps going broom into broom into
if
broom.
the genetics of Englishtown allow it more likely to mutate a witch's broom. And then it makes you wonder if a lot of the plant genetics itself are playing more into the fact that some of these are creating witches' brooms. And so,
well, it could be like a virus that mutates constantly. It's like the COVID. You can see how it's mutating all the time. And there could be something in the genetic makeup of Englishtown that causes that to do the same thing.
It's the inception of Japanese maples. It's the dream in a dream. I had you present one time, and it was one of my favorite presentations ever at the Maple Society, and we just had a blast. And we had you present on brooms to the Maple Society, and I think you had the whole place in stitches laughing, but it was really educational as well. And I just wanted you to talk briefly about that. You talked a little bit about some of your theories on how brooms come about.
Yes, I remember that. In fact, I also did some 2 very tiny graphs to show people that you could do it with very tiny wood. And I looked at that 3 years later, and the brooms were doing fine, grafted on the original tree, even though they were, they were smaller than an eighth, probably a 16th in width. We used to call those sparrow legs.
Right.
When we would trade wood, somebody would send us we'd send them a pencil-sized thing, and they'd send us sparrow legs back. Right. It's like, ugh.
Thanks for the needle.
Yeah. I'm sorry, we were talking about
a little bit about the origination of the brooms. I know you talked a little bit about possibly gamma radiation or solar flares.
I still believe that It's gamma radiation from space. It's what gives us skin cancer. And if it was an insect vector or a viral or bacterial vector, like anthracnose in sycamores, the London plane tree, which we call sycamore, it's sick more. It's more sick because of anthracnose. And you'll see these brooms, hundreds of them in a sick sycamore. And that's a bacterial infection. And I've seen that in a lot of trees. But when I come across brooms, whether it's pines or maples or ash trees, I found them in a lot of hollies. It's always one to the whole tree. It doesn't spread.
Yeah.
And that tells me that genetic makeup has been changed by something, and it ain't an insect bite, or you'd see more than one of these on the same tree.
Yeah, I think you can find it sometimes.
A vector of a bacterium or a virus, because then you'd see them all over the tree. Now, I've seen an Acer rubrum with multiple brooms on it, and it was all because of a bacterial infection. I'm positive.
I've seen that with mistletoe, creating a broom, but my experience has been when you grafted mistletoe brooms, they clean back up. It cleans up the infection, and then they're back to normal.
That's like the Abies conica or Picea Abies conica, the Alberti broom, the spruce.
Yeah.
Hello?
Yeah,
we're here.
You in, I would say, a third of them, when you see them, they've got sprouted the original spruce sprouting out of it somewhere.
Starts to clean itself back up.
It reverts back, and that one is prone to that.
I wish we had somebody truly in academia try to help us define some of the terms too. I think it'd be really interesting if we could start to categorize some of these brooms, even within maples, but even within, the whole genre of just witches' brooms, and start to categorize some of the different types, and maybe even, like Twombly's Red Sentinel.
Not the same style of witch's broom at all.
Yeah, it's going to be more of a columnar tall tree, so it's more, for lack of a better term, a bud sport or something. It's created its own thing.
It's still a witch's broom because it was changed genetically.
Yeah,
but the problem,
when you see, it's like Tattoo, the dwarf witch's broom there. That one was named after Hervé Felicius, the actor in the James Bond movie.
Yes.
Tattoo. Now he is changed forever genetically, and if you could copy him like Dolly the sheep, then and that's what we do with the broom. We make copies.
Was Tattoo a broom off Makawa?
Tattoo was a broom that was developed by Klein Nursery in Kentucky.
Interesting.
And now Klein, he passed away years ago, and they have a foundation, and they run an arboretum down there. I've never been there, but that's where it came from. And the one that I had, I got from Dick Wolf, and it had a trunk on it about 4 inches wide.
I remember
about 1 foot tall.
Yeah, maybe weak in the knees.
Yeah, well, when you see that, it's like, wow.
A beautiful specimen.
It differentiates from the others because the leaf has a red outer border in the springtime. And when you see that red border about 1/16 of an inch wide on the leaves, you know that is Tattoo. But it's changed genetically, and any genetic change is permanent. And no matter how many times you graft it, it always comes true to the parent because it's the same material. It's the same genetic material. And the understocks don't seem to have any effect. I mean, one year I did a graft with a regular understock, a midsection from a broom, and then a regular upright for the third piece. And I grew it for some years, and there was no change in the top graft. There was no influence by the midsection broom or the understock. And I've done them, all the brooms on understocks, various kinds, from seedlings of bloodgood to wild Acer palmatum. They're my favorites to do. And there's no change in the broom. It's as expected, as advertised to the parent, so that there's no influence from the understock, which, unlike apples, where you can change the height of the trees by midsection grafts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, witches' brooms are just one of those things that are so interesting. I know I've talked to
Dr.
Richard.
But I don't care if they're 8 feet tall or if they're a foot high. They're changed genetically, and that means that's a witch's broom.
Very true.
I did Matthew. I named Matthew after one of my kids. It was a broom about 3 feet by 3 feet, a green, very vigorous looking thing, but it was only 3 feet by 3 feet, and I grafted it and sold a couple. And one lady that I sold it to about 10 years later came back and said that it wasn't a broom. I said, "What do you mean?" "Well, mine is 10 feet tall." And I went and saw it, and it was Matthew with an indented, middle lobe, and it was 10 feet tall in the shade. It just, that's the way it grew. Who knew?
I think our Matthew,
but it's a broom.
I think our Matthew in our display garden,
It's getting pretty big now.
It was really small for a number of years, and then we had a year where there was not a cloud in the sky, and we had a lot of solar flare activity, and there was, forest fires all over western North Carolina. And that year, Matthew grew 3 feet all across the branches, and it just blew our mind that year it decided to grow, and it had been, we're talking a 15-year-old specimen.
Was very small for a
It's
while.
3 to 4 feet.
It's probably 6 or 7 feet now.
It is. It hasn't grew much since that 1 year. But
It's
that
all
one,
in that year.
That's there you go. That's what I said. Yeah, but it's changed genetically, and that genetic change is what makes a broom, a witch's broom. Now it can be a tall growing broom, or it can be a medium-sized broom. The Jerry Schwartz was a good example that I named after my mom. That one grows to about 5-6 feet. Is shrimp pink in the spring, a beautiful color.
Oh yeah.
But it doesn't get tall. It's a medium-sized tree, and you can get them in all different types and sizes, but they're still a witch's broom because they're genetically changed.
For sure.
and that's one of the things that's really interesting. One of the ones that I've seen that people can grow wider than original is one like Twombly's Red Sentinel. Have you grew that one much?
Which one?
Twombly's Red Sentinel.
No, I haven't grown Twombly.
I don't know if it's necessarily a true witch's broom, like Matt talked about, or a bud sport, because sometimes people can start growing it really, really fast, and it will lose all of its short and center nodes.
I think it has more to do with how heavy it's pushed with fertilizers and also how heavy it's trimmed back. And with that one wanting to be an upright, if it's not given a central leader,
that can influence. It's like when you have different soil requirements for different crops. Like corn won't grow in acid soil, and it needs basic soil to open its mouth to feed. If you have the ideal growing conditions, whether it's 8-10-10 or 2-10-5 or whatever, a tree can grow differently. Obviously, and it can be shortened, it can be lengthened. It depends on the growing conditions, and that's what they are. The one problem I find with most variegateds and brooms is their water requirement. They're so touchy on that they can just turn toes up because they're deprived of water, and overnight.
So are you still grafting much this year? Have you done many grafts?
Yeah, I have done some. I've done about 100, and I'll do about 100 more. And that's about it. But just to keep my hand in.
I always have to ask you because you always got the cool stuff.
Tunnel, but I'm still doing it.
So, what is your favorite introduction besides some of the witches' brooms that you found?
Oh boy, my favorite.
They already said Judy Girl was the best broom, so I'm sticking with that.
Yeah, Judy Girl is.
That's going in my description for Judy Girl.
But besides witches' brooms, what's your favorite introduction that you found? Because you're one of the kings of witches' brooms. When it comes to witches' brooms and Billy Schwartz are pretty much synonymous. So,
He's named some good japonicums. I don't know if Gossamer is considered a broom. That was probably a seedling, but that's a pretty good.
Yeah, it's not a broom. It's a seedling that occurred, and
that's a pretty popular one.
Yeah, it's. When you look at that winter bud, and that ain't Acer palmatum, babe. It's really not.
I would guess your most popular tree you've named is probably Jerry Schwartz. I've seen that in garden centers in Belgium. So it's all over the world.
Oh yeah, It's I found that in a brick red, which is it's a kind of off color red, brick red tree about 20 feet tall, and it was in Upper Darby, Pennsylvania. I don't know if it's still there. And I lost my Jerry Schwartz too. I had to leave it at the old nursery. So if you have some of that, just put some signs of that in.
We can get you whatever you need. We'll send you trees.
Just 6 of them. That's all. But
no problem. We've got 100.
But this one, when I saw it, I said, look at all those. There was a lot of seed hanging from it, and I've never seen that before. Most witches' brooms, even the large ones at NA, they like Brandt's dwarf. They have shrunken samaras that grow for about 8 weeks and then shrink and then fall off. But they don't produce real seed. Now, this broom produced tremendous amount of seed hanging all over the damn thing. I never thought to pick it and try to grow it. But it was the only broom I've ever seen with seed.
It's very rare, apparently, to have seed on a witch's broom, and then it's even more rare for it to be viable in palmatums. But I think it's possible.
According to Dr. Richard Olson,
I'm going to have to make a trip to see if I can find that damn tree, see if it's still there, and see if there's seed. See if that broom is alive, and if it is, then next fall I'll be there.
Dr. Richard Olson went with the same theory that Sid Waxman came up with the pines, that half of them should show some witch's broom tendency, and they should have a tighter, compact, dense habit.
That's how he determined, when he because there's so many brooms that he saw, and all of them had female flowers, and none of them had male flowers, and that's what tipped them off. And then when he started planting the seeds, it bore out because half were mutated and half weren't.
Yeah, I find that the seeds tend to. I've collected a few myself. I found some seeds on a few. Tim and I did.
Twombly's Red Sentinel, Cunard Pygmy, and Tiny Tim.
I believe we found a little bit on Brandt's one time at the National Arboretum too. Brandt's dwarf. We were going around the National Arboretum and found a few seeds on that.
But the Brandt's dwarf don't seem to be able to develop into a true seed.
None of them were viable. I don't think it had any of them germinate. I've heard of people getting a few to germinate, but it's extremely rare.
The interesting thing is that this mutation may be causing the seed to not produce the food. And since we just recently had our interview with Dr. Sue Weegriff, could you take the witch's broom seed and place it in a petri dish that has the food for the seed to germinate and cause that to germinate?
That's an interesting thought.
We just had an interview with Dr. Susan Weegriff, who's a plant breeder, and she basically talked about how sometimes some mutations or some plants that hybridize with each other produce a seed that doesn't actually have the food for the seed to develop, and you can actually give an artificial food to it to make the seed develop. So that would be
as long as you get a radical, the root, then that would work.
I think the problem
you got to have.
Yeah, I think the
you've
problem.
Got to have the receptor. You've got to have the receptor for the food.
I think most of the witch's brooms are just parthenocarpic, like the nutlet doesn't fully develop, so it's a lost cause there unless it's got all the pieces it needs to germinate. But
Yeah, I'm going to have to go back and see this other broom in Upper Darby and see if I can find it, and then I'll be there next fall to collect seed. Yeah, because that had that must have been hundreds and hundreds of seeds on this damn thing hanging.
so you told me once you helped file all the paperwork to start the North American, or I guess it's just the Conifer Society. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I did the ACS. Yeah.
So
Well, what happened was I didn't know a lot of the wealthy growers on the West Coast. And Joel Spingarn, nursery guy in Long Island, in New York, he's a photographer and a big guy in conifers and as a hobby. And he wanted to do it, and he called me because I'm the lawyer nurseryman, and he wanted to start a society that would get a C3 charitable designation, so you could leave money in your will and take a deduction for that money that you donated. It would be IRS recognizable as a deduction. And I had done one before, C3 charitable designation. So I said, I can do it, but I'd have to meet you, and we'd have to. So he said, okay. He said, is there anything you need? I said, yeah, well, I want to pick some cones from a Pinus, the red Japanese maple that he had, the variegated one. I said, you got a nice one in the backyard. Does it have any cones? He said, yeah. I said, well, I'll come up and pick some cones, and then we'll talk. So I drove up there, and I had my shit-kicking shoes on, and old pants and a shirt, torn shirt and whatnot. And I get there, and there are these limousines up and down the street, black limousines. And I go to the front door, and there's a jar, glass like flower vase filled with water, and there's a thing with a roll of paper towels next to it. Oh my God, did he die? What the hell's going on? And I rap on the door, and there's nobody at the door. Oh my God, what the hell's going on here? And I walk around to the back, and all these people are in the back, and he's okay, but he's entertaining all these guys from the West Coast, these wealthy guys. They're all dressed to the nines, and they all want to meet to form the ACS.
Oh, very cool.
And I had no idea what was going on. Here I am in my schlumpy clothes. And the first guy that met me, he talked like this, voice of doom. I said, I know you. And it was, what's his name? Starts with a V, nursery in Oregon. Oh my God. He's producing Goldilocks. What the hell's his name? He died. His brother took over the nursery and sold it to a mail order place.
Isley
Nursery? I knew it was him.
Isley Nursery?
Yeah, Isley. Yeah, it was John Isley. And I said, I know you. Because I've spoken to you on the phone. That voice. I know that voice. He brought in a lot of introductions from Japan in his diplomatic pouch because there was no inspection.
Nice. That sounds good to me. Let's go. Let's get some nursery.
He was a spook. He was a spook for the U.S. government. And he brought in, there's one that I never got that I always wanted to get. It was a variegated Aristata pine. And it was growing at their house. I never got it, but he was responsible for a lot of them. So that's history.
Hey, so I can listen to your stories all day, but for the sake of our viewership, is there any other maple stories you want to tell before we get out of here? Like, is there any one that really stands out to you? because your stories are my favorite. We could do like part 5 of this for me. I'm not gonna lie, this is self-serving here, really. I just think your stories they crack me up. I'll listen to this one multiple times. But are there any Billy Schwartz stories or even Dick Wolf or anything that you really stands out to you, Maple related, that you think people should hear about?
Well, the best one, of course, was the Dottie story, and I've got to get some of that broom because I lost that one too. But
I need to get that one going too.
Yeah, I'll find it. I think it's on the West Coast. I think that's where I sent it. But that was the best one. To put a smile on that dying lady's face was. It's just it's so rewarding. It's just one of those things. So yeah.
Billy, thank you so much for your time today, sir. It's an honor and a pleasure. You crack me up. I enjoy it.
There's one more. What's the name of the broom for Sangokeku?
There's a couple of them.
There's Little Sango. There's
one that Matt and I found called Cupid. There's one called there's a dwarf version called Akakawahime. I'm not sure if that was a broom or not. There's Corvallis broom. There's Fagellheim.
I thought there was just one.
There's Fagellheim.
Yeah, Fagellheim. That's the one. That's the name I heard. I had that at one time. So I don't know if you have a couple of signs of that. I think try and grab it.
I think we all had that at one time, unfortunately.
That one tends to be Fagellheim tends to be pretty finicky for us. It's one I do tend to, I always joke with people. There's so many good trees. I hate to produce the wimps, but I find that if I can't keep it too happy, I don't think my customers will. Yeah,
absolutely, because the customer, the trees that I would sell to people, I would make sure I wouldn't sell a 1-year graft, a fresh graft. It had to survive a winter for me in order for me to let it go.
We can get you some wood on another Sangokaku witch's broom that doesn't have the short and center nodes, but has that same tight compact habit.
Like Cupid or Little Sango or Far Superior.
Fine, send it. I'll graft it. Yeah.
Hey.
All right, guys. It's been a pleasure, and anytime.
Hey, appreciate you, sir. You're awesome.
And when you want to come north, you let me know, and I'll set it up.
I will take you up on that soon. I'm kind of jealous of that trip still.
We'll have to be doing that sometime real soon, Billy. It's always a pleasure talking with you and hearing all these awesome stories. And it's funny because I've heard some of these stories, but then I think today we expanded on some of them too and learned a whole lot that we'd never heard before. So it's always a pleasure.
Well, right. I'm going to have to get you some of these trees that you don't have. So that'll be my mission for the next year, and I'll get them.
Our door's always open, and we have a place to stay here too. So if you and Judy ever make it down this way, we'd love to have you.
Well, we're thinking of in the spring. She has a very close friend that's in North Carolina, on the coast, and so we might take a swing trip. So
come on by.
So you might see me.
Sounds good.
All right, take care, Billy.
All right,
take care.
Later, baby. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Wow, guys, I hope you enjoyed this interview. Definitely one of our more interesting and controversial ones for sure. We really enjoyed interviewing, Philadelphia lawyer and famous nurseryman Billy Schwartz. I think his stories are so fascinating. He's someone I've always enjoyed talking to, and the guy can tell a story for sure.
Yeah, I mean, he's found so many witches' brooms, but the stories that we heard today from...
Did he say that Muhammad Ali threw the first fight? I think I heard him say that.
He didn't specifically say it, but he said... What he said
no dancing.
No dancing in the first fight, and he agreed to that. That's the reason he lost.
Maybe this one should hit Sports Center.
He agreed for 3 fights. I mean, that's crazy. But then he also said John Isley was a CIA operative. So
right.
There's a lot of crazy
podcasts here. I think we hit the Joe Rogan algorithm this time. It's been a fun one. It's always a fun time talking to Billy Schwartz. So I find him super interesting. His stories, they're legend, as you can tell. And I hope you enjoyed this one, guys. We love bringing you podcasts with interesting people that we find interesting. So if this is something you enjoyed, definitely find us on your favorite podcast platform and rate us 5 stars.
Yeah, I mean, this is legendary. I mean, just all the maple stuff alone. I mean, we're talking about Billy Schwartz, the guy whose daughter is Shayna.
Right.
I mean,
his mother's Jerry.
His mother's Jerry Schwartz. And he was an apprentice under Dick Wolf who introduced Emperor One.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much amazing stuff in this last podcast.
If you're into maple history, this is a source.
if you're into history.
Right. If you like Muhammad Ali stories, if you like, world history, here you go.
Yeah, I mean, this was a really fun podcast. It's always a fun and pleasure to talk with Billy, and we always get some new and exciting stories every time we talk to him.
And guys, if you're listening to us on our audio platforms, we air daily videos on the Mr. Maple Show on YouTube. We put out videos every single day at 9 a.m. Eastern. I know a lot of people are finding us now on the audio platform, so I always like to make a plug for our video format. These podcasts air each Sunday night at 8 p.m. Eastern on the Mr. Maple Show too, so you can hop in those premieres, and that's 8 p.m. Eastern time.
Yeah, and we really appreciate you listening. As always, smash that like button if you're watching this on YouTube Live, and give us that 5-star rating, and let other people know about our podcast. I mean, we've got a gardening podcast that is so unusual and so different.
I don't think you have to worry about this one getting out here. I'm ready to hear from Sports Center about Muhammad Ali right now. I don't know. I think this one may go viral.
This one was one of the more exciting ones, I think. There's so much information that just got released here that I don't think anyone's ever heard before.
To be fair, we're not editing out any of the good stuff. We're just going to let the story speak for itself, and that's what it is.
Exactly. I mean, wow. I mean, that's all I can say about this interview is wow. I mean...
Yeah, we left it. We were still in shock afterward, and we're still in shock now. So I hope you enjoyed this one. Take care.
God bless.
And have a great day.